it look like?
It just should be a red button.
Well, can you see it? I've hit it and it says it is recording. Can you see
You
that?
are recording. You're good.
It is.
Okay, awesome, great.
Cool. Yeah, so sorry, Mayor Larson. Alan will be here.
Cool.
And Jonathan, I spoke with him. So full house except for Eric. Full house of other people. Trustee App is having a little bit of trouble connecting.
All right. We'll give a little bit longer. Yeah, because I think he's the only one we're missing right now, but it is just barely 7 o'clock, so I don't want to set a bad precedence by starting the meeting right at 7.
It would just be so different.
Yeah.
Trustee App says he's going to try a different computer.
Give him a couple more minutes here, and then we'll start and have him join when he can. Well, I think, he's still trying to get on via various computers, Miranda.
Yeah, that's what he said. I don't know. We could just note for the record when he jumps on.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's do that. It's 7:03 p.m. on Tuesday, November 16th, 2021, and we will call to order this meeting of the Town of Nederland Board of Trustees. Macy, if you would please call the roll.
Mayor Larson,
Here.
Trustee Taylor,
Here.
Trustee Apt, Trustee Coombs Ismail, Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Here.
Trustee Danforth, Trustee Corvallin.
Here. It's Trustee Danforth. I'm here. Sorry.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We have 3 items on our consent agenda, our usual warrants and minutes, but also an appointment to our ProSab. Oh, we have 4, sorry, 4 items. But we have an appointment to our ProSab board, and I believe, CT, you're here this evening. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the board, that'd be awesome.
Good evening and hello everybody. I'm CT Hutt, and yep, I applied to be on the board. My wife and I moved up here a couple months ago, but we rented previously. We're just up from Boulder County, or from Boulder City, and yeah, I love the trails up here, and looking forward to contributing how I can.
Awesome, and thank you for volunteering and getting involved in the town. So we
Absolutely.
really appreciate you stepping up. Are there any trustees have either questions or comments regarding anything on the consent agenda this evening?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
So moved. A second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. And note for the record that Trustee Apt has joined us. And Macy, if you'd please call the vote on the consent agenda.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
and Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Consent agenda is passed. Moving along into public comment on non-agenda items, and I actually think we're going to start this a little differently. Miranda.
Yes, I'd love to start it. So unfortunately today we received Garrett McDaniel's letter of resignation. Garrett has been offered an amazing opportunity with Broomfield. Garrett, correct me if I'm wrong here. So his last day with us in the sustainability coordinator role is going to be November 30th. And I just wanted to take a moment and truly thank Garrett for everything he's done for Nederland. For those of you who know, Garrett's actually been with us for a little over a year and a half and has done an absolutely outstanding job. And I actually wanted to go ahead and show a list of accomplishments. So you can see my email here. Garrett had put together this list of accomplishments for us that outlines it's not even exhaustive list. This is just like touching the surface of all the different things that Garrett has done in his time. And I personally thank Garrett for everything and invite him to speak if he'd like, and hope that the Board of Trustees will just so how much we truly appreciate Garrett, everything you've done for Nederland, the Peak City community, and you really set us on a great path for us to move forward. So, Garrett, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, thanks, Miranda. Yeah, like Miranda said, I've been here a little over a year and a half, and it's been such a rewarding experience working for the town, collaborating with the SAB along with other volunteers, other community members, and just really getting to know the town of Nederland. Me living and working remotely, Miranda and Chris Pelletier, as well as the SAB, they've been extremely helpful with getting me the right contacts and getting things sort of getting me in tune with things that are happening in the town. So I just want to say thank you to town staff, Trustee Apt, the SAB. I certainly wouldn't have been able to get this job without the experience I've gained working at the town of Nederland, and I'm really appreciative of that experience. So thank you all.
Thank you
Okay,
so
I
much,
want to
Garrett.
thank you. Yes, Alan, I want to thank you again for all the great work you did. It was really a pleasure working with you. And congratulations on your new position. We're really going to miss you. And we may have to pester you from time to time.
Please do. You have my contact info. I'd love to hear from you all.
Yeah, wax your skis and come on out.
Yeah, definitely.
Assuming we ever get any snow.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to second that, Garrett. Thank you so much for all you've done for the town and really setting the sustainability coordinator on the right path. It's going to be really hard to replace you. I'm going to have to really give a hard time to the new Broomfield mayor, Guyleen, a friend of mine who's stolen you away from us. I'm going to have to harass her badly for that. But thank you for all you've done.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing all you do down below.
Thanks.
This is the time for public comment, however. So if anyone from the public would like to speak on any item that is not on the agenda this evening, now would be your time. Catch our attention, speak up, and you can have up to 3 minutes to let us know what you're thinking about.
This is Rick Hendricks.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say before you go, Rick, I see we have a number of call-in users. Just a reminder to them, if you're muted on call-in, *6 will unmute you. But first, Rick Hendrickson.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Just wanted to give a quick update on the fire up in Estes Park. As of a few minutes ago, last I heard, it was 133 acres, 15% contained. And they'll have crews on it overnight, and tomorrow it's mostly on Forest Service. So the feds have taken control of it, working closely with Larimer County. We also just got word that apparently an air tanker crashed, but no one has got any further information on that yet. It's just came out. So I didn't want to follow Garrett's thing with that, but so we're still waiting to hear more on that. If I hear more before the end of the meeting, I will give you an update. That's all.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rick, and hopefully, hopefully everyone got. Hopefully the air tanker crash is as good a situation as that can be. Yeah, it's horrible news. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Not seeing or hearing any. We will move forward into our informational item for this evening, which is about our trying to replace our town marshal in Miranda. How's that going?
Yeah, I think my plan is to just provide continuous updates and information as we move forward. So I'm just going to give a quick recap. The applications were due by 9 a.m. on November 8th. We received 21 applications in that time frame. Our initial application committee, which consisted of myself, Christy Ruman, Trustee Coombs Ismail, Trustee Corvalin, and Larry Johns, narrowed that group down to originally a list of 13, then met to kind of whittle it away even more, and came up with kind of the top 6 candidates that we felt met the minimum qualification. The full application review committee, which consists of Trustee Taylor, Trustee Coombs Ismail, 4 community members, and department heads, then met and felt like 5 out of the 6 candidates were really the top, and that 3 of those 5 stood out the most. The full application and review committee, however, felt that it would be beneficial to interview those top 3 candidates amongst just that full application review committee before asking people to come for in-person interviews or really passing them on to the Board of Trustees. So we've scheduled virtual interviews with those top 3 candidates that will happen this week and next week. And then if we feel that those are our top 3 candidates, we'll move forward. Or if we feel that maybe 1 or 2 of them is not a good fit, we have those other 2 candidates out of that top 5 that we could still interview. So we're kind of in that fleshing out phase. The full application review committee did meet yesterday to finalize application questions and interview questions. So we look forward to having those discussions. Given that we are adding in that full committee virtual interview, things do push out a little bit further. We would probably be looking at doing the kind of the true interviews somewhere between November 29th and December 10th. Then we go into the psych, poly, physical, and background check somewhere between the 13th of December through the 30th, with the goal of the board appointing a town marshal in January 4th. That does still allow for at least that minimum of 90-day overlap with Larry. It just kind of adjusts things a little bit. So that's really where we stand on the town marshal recruitment. And I guess my only question for the board is, do you have questions for me about the recruitment process or the updated timeline?
Trustees, any questions for Miranda?
Miranda, this is Trustee Taylor. I just wanted to thank you for the very competent and workmanlike approach you've been taking to these meetings, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on them.
Thank you.
All right, I'll look forward to the next steps on that. Moving forward into our action items this evening, of which we have 2. The first being appointment to a vacancy at the Ndda. And I believe, Miranda, you're going to introduce instead of Kate.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kate Mazzingale couldn't make it after all tonight. So before you tonight is a vacancy for the Ndda. Karina Lucier had to resign in September. We posted the vacancy the day of her resignation. Applications were due October 20th. We received 2 applications for David Seitz and Catherine Vallon. The Ndda met last week, and the board approved recommending David Seitz for appointment. Catherine Vallon may be on the phone. I do know we have David Seitz here to share why he's interested in joining the Ndda. But the question before you tonight is, does the board approve recommending Seitz, as that was the Ndda's choice to fill that vacancy with a term ending June 1st, 2024.
Thank you, Miranda. And David and Catherine, if you're on, thank you very much for applying. David, if you want to introduce and explain why you want to be on the DDA board, that would be great. You're muted, David.
And David, if you ended up calling into, you may need to press *6. I know we had some challenges at the DDA with him being able to jump on.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
We
perfect.
can.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I had a real tough time with this thing. My Mac just doesn't like this application. In any case, my name is David Seitz. I live at 101 East 2nd Street. And I'm interested in joining the DDA largely because I agree with their mandate. I would like to see the downtown redeveloped. And so that's a part of it. And then where I'd like to contribute, you know, if people are interested, is, you know, maybe having some events in the downtown area on Saturday afternoons with music and fairs, you know, sort of a Saturday version of what we're doing on Sundays with the farmers market. And I'm also interested in the traffic situation. And, you know, this is just something that I thought about the other day. You know, it clearly isn't my agenda. But I was thinking that if we could hire some traffic guards to come up during busy days, we can defer, well, we can just make everybody's life a lot simpler. And that's something that I think the DDA could do. So that's about it. Does anybody have any questions?
Get to questions here in a second. I just want to get a chance to introduce, and then I'll come back for questions because I want to make sure is Catherine, are you one of the call-in users? Okay, doesn't sound like it. So
Catherine
I just
wasn't
wanted, yeah, give a
entirely
chance
sure.
here.
She
Sorry,
wasn't
what?
sure. She wasn't entirely sure she'd be able to join tonight.
Okay.
but-
So yeah, I think questions for David, and I'll start off here, David, because I know you're a property owner in the DDA within the DDA district, but not a business owner. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess okay. I guess my other question for you, you mentioned being interested in the redevelopment of downtown Nederland, which I know is something that's been proposed for a long time, and there are plans currently at the library and town hall provided by Ron Mitchell. And in those plans, your house is subsumed by one of the large new buildings. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have an agreement, some kind of contract with Mr. Mitchell, or are you somehow working with him on his development plans?
Yes.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
And I've thought about that, whether it was a conflict of interest, but this isn't a judicial position.
Right.
And then, in a sense, anybody who's involved in this is going to be an advocate and automatically has an interest, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just wanted to be clear for the record. Other trustees have questions for David?
So this is Trustee Taylor, and I've turned off my video because I always have to turn off my video. So David, the specific proposal that's on post at the library, is that a proposal that you advocate?
Yes.
Okay. Let me say something that I said at an earlier meeting. Mayor, the last time we had a vote like this between two people, we had a nomination and then a vote, a nomination and then a vote. And that gives the impression that we're voting against people, when in actual fact, we're really more thinking in terms of what's the most compatible selection. I would like to propose that when we vote, when we decide to choose, that each board member, and each board member undoubtedly has an idea in their heads as to which person they think is most compatible. I would like to suggest that instead of nominating and voting, each member of the board name the person that they would choose as most compatible with the DDA. And then for each of those trustees, at the end of that, the person with the most check marks by their name, that would be the nominee. That's what I would like to propose when we vote.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. Other trustees have questions for David?
I have a question.
Yeah, Tanya.
I was just curious, just his opinion of what would be the most pressing issue with the downtown, like that you would like to see improved. Something, that could happen within, a year or two, not like a huge development, but like something that's a fixable, doable problem. What would be, in your idea, something?
Yeah, I alluded to it, and that was the hiring traffic guards on the weekends when there's extra traffic. That would be one. The other would be doing the sort of events that I was sort of like the food market, the food fair, the farmers market.
Oh, like more of that, more community events.
Yes, and in the downtown, and where it would work and how it would work with neighbors, because there are a lot of people who don't like noise.
Yeah.
And so how we can direct that in a way that doesn't drive people nuts.
Is Chipeta Park considered part of the DDA jurisdiction? Can they plan events in Chipeta Park, Mayor, or whoever?
Yeah, Chipeta Park is a part of the district.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, like, one of my dreams would be like every month a fun little event with the proceeds going to nonprofits. That's just.
I hesitate use the term, but like a micro Ned Fest.
Yeah.
Something that was very manageable. If I were to throw a budget off the top of my head, I would say $5,000 per event.
Mm-hmm.
Get a sound system and a decent band and, that sort of thing. But, as I said, we have to be sensitive to, some people hate music.
I think you're not, I know we're off topic, but like doing them from the hours of 4 to 7 or something, where it's not,
Yeah.
effective. All right. Well,
Right.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. Other trustees have questions for David? I guess I have one other question, and it was a question I was going to ask Kate as the DDA executive director, but I know we have Jonathan, you're our DDA liaison. I also see our DDA chair on here, Barb Hart. So I'm just curious, because the minutes haven't come out from the DDA meeting of last week yet. I was curious about what was the discussion at the DDA? I mean, you said that the board recommended David Seitz, but I'm just curious, was there a vote for that, or how did that go?
You would have to ask Bob Hart. I actually missed this last meeting. I believe there definitely was a vote. I believe it was a silent vote. And to my knowledge, it came back that the board recommended David Seitz. I was not present for the discussion, so maybe
Mayor
Barb.
Larson, I can clarify. It's Miranda.
Okay.
So there was a silent vote, which takes place in the form of electronic communication of how people voted. And it was 6 voted for David Seitz and 1 voted for Catherine Bell.
Okay, thank you. This is always the hard part before we go into the next pieces, this is an action item. I would like to open this up to public comment. Any member of the public would like to comment on this, now would be your opportunity. You can have up to 3 minutes as usual if you identify yourself, whether you're a resident or not, and catch our attention.
So we have a comment from Kathleen Chipai. Kathleen Chipai, 30-year resident, East Magnolia, 18-year business owner. I support David Seitz being appointed to the Ndda board. The BOT is supposed to be listening to the DDA vote, not ignore the DDA's vote. Every person on the DDA board must, per law, be a paying member of the tax district. So every person applying to the DDA board doesn't have a conflict of interest, but does have a right to decide how tax dollars they pay are invested into the DDA tax district. And that's the end of the comment. And Mayor Larson, I just wanted to note that Catherine is on now.
Oh, Catherine is on. Okay. Oh, hello, Catherine. I did not see your name there. Let's finish public comment. Actually, let's interrupt public comment. Catherine, if you'd introduce yourself as we gave David the opportunity, and let us know why you're interested in being part of the DDA, and then I'll come back to public comment. And if you're on your phone, Catherine, if you're one of the dial-in users, you might need to do *6. I see your name, but we're not hearing anything.
I know she too had some challenges, so Catherine may be trying to call in.
Okay. We will continue with public comment, and then we'll come back to Catherine. If there are other members of the public who would like to speak on this item, thank you, Kathleen, for your comment. Anyone else? I am not seeing or hearing anyone else. Coming back to the board, seems like Catherine may still be having audio issues, and not be able to speak. Oh, I got a new call-in user.
I just called in.
Catherine.
Sorry, yeah. You guys couldn't hear me. I'm not sure what's up with this. We had problems with this the night of the DDA meeting as well. And so that was me now calling in so I can actually be heard.
Well, I'm glad you
So-
did. Please, introduce yourself and let us know why you're interested in being part of the DDA.
Okay. So I've been in practice as a chiropractor here in Netherlands since 1988. Back when the DDA very first started, I used to be involved with it. And then, I was a single mom for a long time, got busy with other things. We seemed to have a lot of difficulty getting traction in the earlier days. And now my son is grown, gone, graduated from college. And I find myself with time and the interest and energy to, try and kind of do what I can to help move things in a good direction for Nederland and for the businesses and for the town itself. Anyhow, I just thought since there was space on the board and space in my schedule, I'd put my hat in there and see if there's any way I can be of help.
Thank you for doing so. Trustees, any questions for Catherine?
This is Trustee Taylor. Catherine, what do you see as an ideal route to the development of the downtown?
Well, I don't think there's one ideal route. I mean, there's challenges that we've had in the town for a long time that, make it difficult. My business is different from many of the others. I'm in one of the few businesses in town that probably doesn't really benefit from tourist traffic and everything, but most of the businesses, or at least a large portion of them, kind of rely on that people would come to town, be able to find a place to park, be able to access their business and come in and, either sit down and have a meal or shop or do whatever. I mean, we've got good restaurants, we've got excellent little fun businesses that, people oftentimes don't find themselves able to easily navigate where they can go, park, and actually take advantage of the businesses. I know that they've been, talking about various apps and kiosks and things like that to try and help people be able to figure out, like, where could they park? If they do park, how hard is it to get to where they want to go? But also, too, just the fact that the town ends up kind of clogged up with our one access point across the stream. I know there's been some planning put into, like, what could we do to perhaps develop a second way across with nothing else. Maybe at least the locals could end up finding a place where they can get from one side of town to the other, just so we aren't all trapped going through kind of one choke point in town. The town basically there's a lot of good people and a lot of good businesses, but it's hard for people to know or to find how they can come and find these businesses and make use of them. And so that just takes, as I've seen in the basic plan they've put together, ways to make the town more appealing and more obviously accessible to the people who would come and make use of the town. And at the same time, I know, both locals and tourists alike, like back a few weeks ago when the leaf peepers were clogging up town, I came to town to go to church, and I sat in a traffic jam that started before I got to the Eldora cutoff coming in from Gilpin County, and in 25 minutes I'd only made it to Tilden Street. And so there was no point in trying to continue on to actually get to church, because by the time I got there it was going to be over. But that kind of experience puts people off, and even puts the locals off from coming into town on a weekend or on a busy weekend anyhow, just because if you can't get into town to have a meal while you're still hungry, or to go to church, or to do whatever you're coming into town to do, then you get frustrated and go, nope, I'm going to head in the other direction next time. So that's, an extreme simplification, but those are the, some of the challenges that I think really, if we can find is going to benefit.
Thank you. I appreciate your holistic approach.
Other trustees with questions for Catherine?
Trustee Danforth. I have a question. What do you think is the most important project that the DDA is working on currently, and what would you do to help push it forward?
Well, I haven't been attending the meetings lately, so I can't tell you for sure where they're at in each stage of each project. You know, reading through 40-some pages of what the plan is, but not really having access to where are we at with each of these. Have any of these pieces been tabled or abandoned or anything like that? You know, I don't feel fully qualified to answer this question, but I do know that the meeting that we attended the other night, that they were, you know, talking about setting up apps, which I think, you know, I'm kind of, you know, older than probably some of the other people on the board and everything, and so I'm not super huge into using apps on my phone, but I realize that's the wave of the future. That's what's going on now. That's how people find, you know, where they're going to go, what they're going to do, what trails they're going to hike, whether or not there's parking available. And so, and again, you know, in a small town that maybe doesn't have a $1 zillion budget, it seems like a cost-effective way to start at least having some communication to help the person coming into town navigate what they can and how they should try to do things. And so that seemed, you know, basically when they were talking about it, I was like, this is really cool, and this seems like it's very timely and probably one of the first things that can be tackled and would make a big difference. You know, obviously that's going to move more quickly than trying to get civil engineers to figure out where to put a bridge across, you know, a stream or something. But as far as is it the most important, the top important, it might just be one of those cases if it's the one that we can work on now and get finished most quickly, that will then help open pathways to some of the other projects.
Perfect, thank you.
Other trustees?
I had a question. We asked Mr. Seitz about the proposal to redevelop downtown, which is basically proposed by Ron Mitchell, and I wondered if you had looked at that or have an opinion on it.
You know, again, not being sure I'm entirely up to date on what, you know, I've known Mr. Mitchell for a long time, and I know he's had various redevelopment plans over time that kind of morphed. Some of the pieces of his plan, I think, are good and appealing. I don't know if he's abandoned the idea of the below ground parking deck or not. Parking is certainly an issue, but I also worry about the engineering feat that it would take to put an underground parking deck between two stream beds in town. And, you know, I feel like I have a lot of questions there before I would, you know, that particular question. I have a lot of questions about, like, what does the most current version of his development plan look like? You know, we ran into some things where they were wondering if I was qualified to run for the board because I am a business owner and a lessee in town, but they need to have a vast majority of the people on the board actually own property or live in the Ndda district. But the Ndda district, I almost feel like by himself, you know, Ron could represent a majority just because of how many properties he owns within the district. And it starts to beg the question, how many more people can own a property if they're already owned? But I think he's got a very vested interest in trying to develop the town. And it's always going to be a balancing act between is his vision the best possible, and if not, you know, then it comes to negotiating. Okay, we want development, we want the town to be nice. We also don't necessarily want it to become something that rolls into something where Nederland loses its entire identity, and where people who move to Nederland for what Nederland was feel like now it's not why they came there or brought their children there.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your application.
Thanks, Alan. Other trustees have questions for Catherine? All right. You know, first off, Catherine, David, both of you, thank you so much for stepping up. As I said for CT earlier during the consent agenda, really appreciate anyone who steps up to volunteer for this town. The amount of time and effort it takes as a volunteer board member. You guys, it's really the advisory boards and the people who do that keep this town going forward and make it so we can we can really, as a town, punch above our weight. We're really doing far more than most other towns our size because of the volunteers like you guys who step up. So thank you. And it's one of those disappointing things. We only get to appoint one of you because, you know, we always would love to have both of you on the board. Now, as Trustee Taylor suggested, the idea of, what I heard there was something along the idea of a straw poll. Each trustee can indicate who they are feel is the best fit for the DDA board at this point in time, and then we would, assuming that came to a decision of some sort, you know, we do unfortunately have an even number of people here tonight, but assuming it's not a 3-3 situation, then we could have a motion to appoint whomever is the majority choice of the board, instead of having a motion who then we are potentially voting against people. So Trustee Taylor, is that was your suggestion? Did I capture that correctly? And if so, would you like to go first?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you very much. That is exactly what I was suggesting. And I would like to vote here for Christine Valen.
Okay, I believe that's a vote for Catherine Valen.
Sorry, you are absolutely correct. My screen is a little fuzzy here.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm a
understandable. Trustee Apt?
I would also like to support Catherine Valen.
Okay. Trustee Corvalin?
I will say David Seitz.
Okay. Trustee Danforth?
I would like to vote for Catherine Valen.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer?
I'm torn. I'm going to have to stand as the liaison of the DDA to represent their votes and vote for Scythe, but I believe that both individuals have actually spoken to a lot of the issues the DDA is currently addressing and is well within its wheelhouse. And I think everything that was spoken to was very intelligent from both the applicants. So my vote will go to Scythe.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, it's definitely the tough choice, right? You know, would love to have both of them. But I think, yeah, given where the DDA is today and what we've heard from from the two applicants, I would put my vote to Catherine Valen as well. So I believe by my tally, that would be 4 trustees interested in Catherine Valen and 2 in David Seitz. Do we have someone who'd like to make a motion?
I make a motion to appoint Catherine Valen to the NDDA.
Do we have a second?
Second, Alan.
Second from Trustee Apt. Macy.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer,
Yes.
Trustee Corvalin,
Yes.
and Mayor Larson.
Yes. Again, David, Catherine, thank you both so very much. Catherine, congratulations. Look forward to working with you. And David, look forward to, you know, future application. I'm sure this is not the last vacancy on the DDA that we'll see. But thank you guys all very much, both very much, for applying and for joining us here this evening to field our questions.
Thank you. Thank everybody.
Okay, we are moving on to our second action item of this evening, which is continuation of the discussion we had last week. Well, it is the public hearing version of what we were discussing last week of the 2018 building codes. And Miranda, you're going to catch us up on where we left it off.
Yeah, so I'll just do a really quick recap because I didn't change much from the last meeting, but just a reminder to the Board of Trustees that we did take the recommendations that were discussed at the October 19th meeting and integrated it where appropriate. Many of the recommendations actually already fell within these respective building codes, but I'll just do a quick recap. We are going to keep sewer depth at 12 inches, which is a public works recommendation, and that's already outlined in the International Plumbing Code. For the occupancy requirements, this is something that Ron Mitchell had brought up in the International Residential Code, section 304 through 05. Bayfield is recommending that there are no changes there. Really, it's actually been in code forever, and it's the minimum requirement for health and sanitation purposes. However, there is a whole section for tiny homes. So it doesn't preclude having smaller spaces. You would just go to the Appendix Q for standards on tiny homes. Rick Henriksen and Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover met and kind of talked through sprinkler requirements and ultimately landed on an exception for buildings that are 400 square feet or less. And that's clarified in section R 313.2 under section 18.2C14, which is page 9 of the attached ordinance. We are going to do solar ready for single family and townhomes. That's actually kind of sprinkled throughout the residential and the energy codes and various appendices. So you'll see those outlined here. So there were no changes needed. When it comes to EV capable, we did add that under section 18.2C20, which is page 19. You will see that as well as the definition of EV capable. The one thing that does not just fall into the ordinance itself, because it's truly a chapter 16 zoning code piece, is the parking. There was a recommendation to have 25% of parking spaces for multifamily new builds to be EV capable. You wouldn't actually implement such a change into this ordinance that's before you. We would do that under a chapter 16 zoning code amendment. So tonight we are looking for the Board of Trustees to hopefully approve this ordinance. And if you then approve it, it will go into effect January 1st, 2022. But then we do offer a second question here, which I don't think we fully fleshed out last week due to time, was does the Board of Trustees want us to work on amending Chapter 16 to include a requirement about that 25% of parking spaces for multifamily new build be EV capable?
Thank you, Miranda. Let's questions for Miranda, and also as I go through here, kind of we can weigh in on trustees can weigh in on that last question she posed, and I'll kick it off with just thanking you for all the work you've done on this and summarizing it and keeping it going. I think these all look very good to me, and I would certainly be in favor of the modifications to Chapter 16 and making that something we would tackle in the coming coming calendar year. Jonathan Baumhover, Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover, have you open us up since you're our local expert?
I wouldn't say that, but I'm familiar. I don't really have any questions. I had a nice talk with Rick and can understand from his perspective as, our fire marshal, and from a health and human safety perspective, why they're really pushing that, especially with the increase in wildfires we've seen and the incidences we've had in town over the past few years, that sprinklers have helped. So I think what we largely discussed was coming up in future years with essentially the ability for folks to apply for a variance in kind of the next square foot range, which we had largely discussed, I think somewhere between 400 and 800 square feet, that if you could meet certain requirements, that we will work together kind of in the coming year, I would say, kind of discuss these things and look into it, and probably be ready to put that variance application kind of guidelines into effect maybe the next time, because Rick indicated that he has a lot of things in the 2021 building code that he would like to see potentially looked at by the BOT. I guess my only future comments is from a perspective of the building industry. We do have to recognize as a town board that on a state level, you're still tested on the 2015 building code. The way those tests work is an open book test. So you are essentially asking the contractors in town to go a step above the state, which there's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware that it increases costs in certain parts, which ultimately I will always speak that the more you increase and legislate and put restrictions and regulations on things, the more ultimately you increase the costs, both on a government level of having to review these codes, safe build, as well as on the contractor and on the customer. So I think the reasons for doing this comes largely from a health and human safety perspective. And I've always kind of questioned in the town of Nederland, is what the staff is trying to do, doing the best job they possibly can do, really in alignment with the constituency's desire from staff, both of the fire department, town staff. And so it's something I would like this board to keep in mind as we move forward doing these things, is that it essentially steps us up to the same par as unincorporated Boulder County, City of Boulder, and potentially some of the reasons people are attracted to Nederland is because we are not unincorporated Boulder County or the City of Boulder. But that's about all I have to say with this.
How do you feel about the idea of the Chapter 16 code modification?
You know, largely, I guess, I have yet to see the proof of electric vehicles on a zero fundamental level of the production costs. Right now, a lot of those vehicles require rare earth minerals and minerals that are not mined in this country due to certain negative viewpoints currently within the environmental sustainability's understanding of mining and where mining is going. Largely, we ship all of those materials across the Atlantic, and that's some really dirty fuel that we're burning. So I have a problem with the push for solar panels, wind panels, and electric vehicles until this country has a domestic source to actually produce those things that is not reliant upon shipping the materials across the Atlantic or the Pacific, because we have more than enough resources and the intelligence to do it. So I don't stand against the idea that electric vehicles are a future and solar panels are the future. But I think pushing to require those things when there is not a domestic, even nationally, supply to actually do that is putting the cart before the horse. So I'm against rewriting that code and requiring electric vehicle chargers for multifamily homes until there is a domestic supply of the minerals and supplies necessary to manufacture those within the country.
All right. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Trustee Taylor?
And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover that some of the minerals that we're using in current batteries are certainly problematic. I myself am hopeful for the iron air battery, which is a battery that, with a little more research, can be equivalent to the lithium batteries and would have few, if any, rare earth metals. Again, that's a future issue. It's not what we're doing right now. I am looking forward with the sincere belief that we're going to work through the rare earth metals problem. And so for that reason, I am in favor of modifying that section of the ordinance to require the chargers. No matter what we come up with, the ideal solution is all public transportation. But here in the United States, we've designed our cities so public transportation is extremely difficult to use exclusively. And so people are going to end up with vehicles of some sort, and those vehicles in the long run can't be running on gasoline. Hey, maybe isopropanol, isobutanol, something like that. But we're not to the point right now where we're expecting liquid fuel of some sort to be our long-term solution. So I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover. This is a risk, but I'm kind of leaning toward the risk. In every other area of this, I'm feeling very comfortable with the wording for this ordinance, and I'm feeling very good about it.
Thank you, Julian. Trustee Danforth.
I think in terms of modifying Chapter 16 to allow for electric vehicles in multifamily homes, I'm in favor of it. I think that, you know, we're headed down that path. We may not have it all figured out at this point, but it seems like this is where we're going. And I think it's important that, you know, we say, what was it, EV ready or EV capable?
EV capable, meaning just ready to put it in.
Yeah, so I think, you know, that's not saying they have to go get the infrastructure and actually have the charging stations. It just means they have to be ready for when that demand comes. So that's why I think it makes sense.
Thank you, Lindsay. Trustee Corvallin.
Just to clarify, I thought we're just EV capable is just making sure the conduit is there, but the plug isn't actually there or anything. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, it's not that big of a deal. It's just so like if you were to pave your driveway or whatever, the conduit would be under there. So I'm fine with that. It doesn't seem like it's that big of an investment for the builder to put the conduit in at the time of construction. I think we're good to go. We talked about this a lot, so.
Thank you, Tanya. Trustee Apt.
I agree that I think we're good to go, and I support rewriting Chapter 16 for the chargers. I think we've got to look to the future and make it easier for people to adopt new technology. And I agree with Jonathan's concerns. That is a real concern, but technology is changing so rapidly, as G. Taylor mentioned, you know, we could be ending up with very different solutions in the very near future. So anyway, I'm in favor. It looks good.
Thank you, Alan. This is an action item, so I will open the floor up to public comment at this time. Anyone from the public who would like to speak on the modifications of the 2018 building code, now would be your chance. Catch our attention. Have up to 3 minutes. Yes, Kathleen.
Haven't seen an email come through yet for her.
Remember to *6 if you're on the phone and you want to speak. Not hearing or seeing any public comment, we'll bring this back to the board for any final comments from the Board of Trustees, or if anyone would like to recite one of the motions we see on our screen.
This is Trustee Taylor. I move to approve ordinance number 823, an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Nederland, adopting certain 2018 building codes and other codes as set out in the title of the ordinance.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second from Trustee Apt. Macy, please call the vote.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Thought I was unmuted. Sorry. Yes. Can you hear me
no
now?
problem. Yes, got it. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yes.
and Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover.
Yes.
Ordinance 823 is passed. Thank you guys all very much for for all the months of work we put into this, especially town staff, and for everyone who's held the meetings on the meetings with fire chiefs and everyone to.
I'd like to make my public comment, please.
I'm sorry, we are done with this topic.
Yeah, I couldn't get in. I sent it in an email, and I'd like to make my public comment. I already heard your vote. I deserve to be able to give my public comment.
We opened the floor to you, and we're on to our next item.
I could not call in. Everyone else that just had problems getting in and talking was given ample time. I don't care if you already voted. I want to give my public comment because I couldn't. Dial in.
Kathleen, 3 minutes, go.
Great. Town is about to adopt the International Building Code language, not having addressed the fact that the International Building Code uses the terminology change of use and change of occupancy interchangeably. This problem screws every property owner out of their zoned use by right. For all of Ned's history, prior to the attempted opening of Brain Freeze, who had a zoning use by right to exist in the now Silver Stem building, change of use meant that a person wanted to use the building for something it is not zoned a use by right for. Historically, when that occurs in Nederland, what can be a costly and lengthy special use review is required, so the tenant or owner must ask the town permission to use their building or property. Mr. Mitchell just underwent a 5-month-long SRU that cost him upwards of $30,000 to get permission to charge for parking after over 2 decades of providing free parking. And Brain Freeze were zoned to use by right, yet town forced them into a change of occupancy per the IBC. So that means it's a change of use requiring an SRU. This misapplication of the historical change of use screwed Brain Freeze out of their zoned use by right of the property they rented, and they had to wait 6 months paying rent while modifying their building to meet the 2012 IBC specifications. The town in Nederland is misapplying change of occupancy for people who have a zone use by right. If adopted without clarifying the difference between change of use and change of occupancy, this can and would impact every property owner tenant in Nederland limits, minus special people like Trustee Danforth, as we have witnessed, who did not need to have a change of occupancy when she moved out of her home and her home became a long-term rental. After town granted Danforth special treatment other than Brain Freeze, and then town forced Josh Pepper into paying a change of occupancy when the property is zoned use by right for retail and was retail prior his storefront business. Easy fix. BOT should either remove the words change of occupancy from the section 105.1 before adopting the International Building Code, or replace it with the words change of use, if that is the intent of the resident staff in BOT, and then town needs to stop punitively using the words change in occupancy when the zoned property use is not changing, meaning it is a use by right. Only the occupant changes. Thank you for giving me my public comment.
Okay, moving on to our first discussion item of this evening, Ordinance 824, changing base fees. I believe this will be introduced by Chris Pelletier and Jennifer Madsen.
Thanks. So before you tonight is a proposal for input concerning how base fees are applied or charged utility customers. Conversation started well over a year ago, and it had to do with staff's, or rather how code is applying base fees currently to customers, which basically it applies the base fee per use, and which is somewhat ambiguous. Staff's interpretation of a use as it applies to a single family home, that if more than one family was living in a single family home, then staff would apply 2 uses or 2 base fees to that residence. This affected approximately 20, I don't remember exactly, 20 or so customers in Netherlands, maybe a few more. And those customers came to the BOT, asking the BOT to reconsider how code is written. BOT directed staff to reconsider and make changes to code to make it clearer. And so Trustee Taylor volunteered his time to work with staff, and he offered a solution to apply the base fee to a particular address, rather than use, to make it more definitive. And so tonight is a change in chapter 1328, 1358, and it's fairly simple change of removing the word use from that section of code and applying the word address and making it more clear. And then there's some definitions in there that that help also define certain terms within the code. And then this was given to Attorney Mattson to review and to change the language to make it more lawful. And so that's basically it in a nutshell. And if you have any questions for me or Trustee Taylor, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chris. Trustee Taylor, I'm going to kick it off with you.
I just want to note that this wording that I proposed isn't perfect, but I think it is more clear than what we had before. And as with all law, I look at it and think, well, wow, that really is a bit of sausage. But I think it's better than what we had before. I think it is clearer, and I think it addresses the specific concerns that our citizens had regarding the use definition. So I'm hopeful that while there was tremendous help here, of course, from staff and from Attorney Madsen. It's not perfect, but I'm hoping the board will find this satisfactory.
Thank you, Julian. And thank you for all the work you put in on doing this. Trustee Apt, any questions?
Sorry, I couldn't get unmuted. No, I don't. I think it's a good compromise and a good revision. So thanks for the work.
Okay. Trustee Corvallin?
Yeah, so just clarifying, now a person will only get charged 2 base fees if they actually have 2 physical addresses connecting that water line to it. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. We're using the address to determine, in a sense, the importance of that location. It's the address kind of marks it as something worth mentioning.
I mean, obviously, if somebody splits their lot up and builds another house, I'll have a new address and there'll be a new base fee. But otherwise, if I wanted to send water to my garage to do a project in my garage, I wouldn't be charged another base fee.
Correct.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm all for this. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Lindsay?
Is this just for residential properties, not business?
The address nomenclature, I believe, unless I have misread this, applies to businesses as well.
But I'm thinking of larger buildings that may have one address, separate units, possibly, or maybe just one address overall, but many taps or many lines.
Yeah.
Does this affect that?
Here again, we're paying attention to how important is that separate section. So let's say it's a large building and there are lots of different laboratories in it, for example, and yet none of those laboratories have addresses. We're saying, okay, those are all part of the same building. And we're saying one base fee for that building. Let's imagine it's a 4-inch tap. Well, we're going to charge them more for a 4-inch tap than for a 2-inch tap. And if multiple taps are required, bear in mind, the base fee is applied for the connection between the tap and the address. So if there are 2 taps, there are 2 base fees, even if it's only talking to 1 address.
Do you think it would be important to include that language in this, so it's not just 1 address, but it's 1 address with 1 tap?
I believe
and separate taps would be.
I am not a wordsmith, Trustee Danforth, but I believe that is the wording of this code. If I have misunderstood what I think I have helped write, then I stand corrected. But Chris, if you or if Attorney Madsen could step in and verify I remember there was a significant amount of talk about that wording, that it is not charging for a tap, not charging for an address, it's charging for a connection between a tap and an address. So multiple taps, multiple base fees.
Yes, I believe that's how it's written
as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is Jennifer Madsen here, and I'm looking at the language 1358 in A1, and it says the base fee shall be assessed for each connection between the tap and the service associated with an unambiguous address, compromising a property or part property.
Comprising, of course. I hope we're not compromising any properties.
Comprising, correct.
So does that answer your question, Trustee Danforth?
I think so.
Thank you.
Jonathan?
I don't have any questions. I just would want to thank Julian for all the time he's put into this. I think he's put a lot of thought into this, as well as thank Chris Peltier for also kind of addressing these inconsistencies. And while I may agree it's not perfect, it's a hell of a lot better than what we were dealing with. So I'm in favor of this.
Yeah, can't agree more with the thanks for Julian and for town staff who worked on this. So yeah, this is a discussion item. We're not passing it forward, but it sounds like most people are very happy with the.
I can't hear him anymore.
Mayor Larson, we lost you.
Yeah, I can't hear him either. He's got a little exclamation point with a triangle in front of his name.
I believe his intention was to call for public comment. I don't know if Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer, you want to take over while he tries to come back?
Sure, this is, well, I guess it's a discussion item, but anyone out there in the public want to make a comment, now would be your time. Get our attention. Well, I guess I'm not seeing or hearing anything. Miranda, I'm on my phone, so it's kind of hard for me to see anyone waving their hand.
Nope, I don't think so. I think we can just recap next steps. So we'll bring this back as an action item at one of the December meetings following public notice for adoption of this ordinance, and then it will go into effect 30 days after date of publication. So this will not be an ordinance that goes into effect 1/1 like the building code. I did connect with Chris and he didn't foresee any issues with that. And so it would likely go into effect mid-January.
Alrighty, sounds good. It looks like we can move on to the next discussion item, which looks like you'll be introducing, which is the occupational tax fund allocation request.
Yes. All right, so let me kind of do just a recap of this. If you all remember back when you shortly became a board in May of 2020, you approved Ordinance 808, implementing a lodging occupational tax, which is applied to short-term rentals or any lodging that is less than 30 days. And with that came the development of the Health and Human Services Fund, which I know Rita reports on every month. Within this fund, the board had indicated that they wanted at least 51%, but no more than 99% of the revenue derived from the occupational tax to go towards health and human services. And there's kind of a list in the ordinance itself of what that might fall into, some of those categories, which I've provided in this document. The Peak to Peak Health and Human Services Alliance, they actually formed a subcommittee to start discussing how to use that occupational tax funds that is received. And that group is a kind of a series of different organizations that make up that Peak to Peak Health and Human Services. And they've submitted a request, and I'd like to just go ahead and turn it over to Chris Current to outline what they are proposing for the Board of Trustees. So Chris, if you're there.
Yes, I am here. I'm assuming that you sent the proposal to the BOT members. Is that correct?
And it's in the packet, so I'll go ahead and pull it up right here so they can take a look.
Okay. So we just, we all came together and had a good discussion on the best use of that money. And we're still discussing some of that, particularly around utilities. And that discussion will continue with part of the Peak to Peak meeting tomorrow morning and trying to get some clarification on where utility funding may be, assistance may be coming from. But we wanted to use it to be the buffer. EFA has certain limits. Canyon Care has certain limits on what they can do. And we would like to use this funding to really satisfy the needs of our clients, while those may be outside of the limits that we're seeing from those various agencies. And those were our discussions, those were our thoughts. We have some educational opportunities that we would like to use that funding for too. Teens Inc. often does some trainings for parents that we would like to offer money for those parents to be able to attend that or to provide childcare for those situations. And it wasn't real complicated. It was real direct. I hope that it meets the requirements for being able to spend this money. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And there is an accountability piece. We thought we'd be accountable every quarter on exactly how the money is being spent so that you would know.
I believe we have Mayor Larson back.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Weird.
Davey, I need you to move that to the bedroom.
Thank you, Chris, for introducing us, bringing it forward. I have one question, and I'm not sure if this is for Chris or Miranda, but with regards to this, is this a one-time request, or is this a ongoing, use of this fund henceforth?
There was a little feedback, Chris, so I muted you. I believe that this is a long or ongoing request that the funds would kind of automatically funnel to this committee to spend.
Yes.
Which they've indicated. Okay.
And we would meet yearly to discuss making this request. So every August, we hope to come together like we started this year to evaluate the situation and see what the needs are going forward and present every year. So, but yes, we would like this to be ongoing and to have this committee be responsible for determining what the best use of this funding could be.
And is this a request for the current amount in the current balance, or the 10,000 that we have budgeted in 2022?
It's a request for the current amount.
And
okay,
I
so
just want to clarify. Yeah, for the board, it was 6,952, but obviously every month we see that increase. And so I do think maybe one to consider is like, do we just allow this, if you were to move forward, does this committee just receive that information from town, how that fund grows? Because while it is paid quarterly, there are people who trickle in after the month is over. And so, you see large deposits every quarter, but every month there's often an
Okay. I guess, yeah, okay. Other trustees have questions or comments for town staff or for Chris? Trustee Apt?
Questions? I guess my one question would be, how soon is the need and how soon should we make these funds available? I guess that's something I may have missed in the conversation.
I can tell you the need is always there.
So does that mean we should expedite this?
It wouldn't hurt. This is the time of year when we get many more requests than midsummer. So yes.
Okay. I guess my question then for Miranda is, how far are we from making this an action item?
Actually, I was just going to ask Attorney Madsen if the Board of Trustees gave a nod of forward and wanted to move forward, would it make sense to bring this back like as a resolution outlining that kind of through this ordinance, this is how the funds would be distributed?
So are you asking about approving it tonight?
No, not approving it tonight. I guess I'm just wondering, because in the ordinance itself, it says the Board of Trustees shall determine the allocation of revenue from the occupational tax. So do we need to amend the ordinance, or how would we indicate that it's not in fact the Board of Trustees making this decision? They are transferring the funds to this subcommittee who will then determine how the funds are spent.
So, but it sounds like the allocation is going to this one group.
Right.
So it would be 100% allocation to the one group.
Well, it can only be up to 99. And actually, I think I answered my own question. We would need to adopt a resolution that provides the rules and procedures for administrating the Health and Human Services Fund. But as a reminder, it can't be more than 99%, at least one. So we would need the board to determine what percentage is going to go to this and what percentage is going to be remain for law enforcement is the other part of that fund.
So it's the type of thing that if this entire board is in favor of this, it's something we could bring back at our next meeting, is sort of the soonest we could do it.
Right, we'd want to bring in a resolution. It would be good to at least have an idea of what percentage the board was thinking of, but yeah, we could bring it back as a resolution at the next meeting.
Okay. Tanya?
Yeah, I certainly don't see any reason not to give them the funding for last year. And I think next year we should maybe let other nonprofits know that this money exists so that it could become more of a, a grant or a rolling where we share it with other nonprofits in the community that could put the money to good use as well. But for now and this year, I don't see why not.
Okay.
As long as they're human service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they meet our ordinance 808. Julian?
Yeah, this is very much how I imagined this was intended to work. There will be changes from year to year in need, and the the Housing and Human Services community will be closest to the actual needs, and the Board of Trustees should produce resolutions that are based upon the recommendations from those who are actually in the field and actually know what's going on. Now, I know the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services group is actually a consortium already of different housing, health, human services organizations within Nederland. I'm thinking that niche is not part of the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services group, and I'm trying to think of other health and human services groups that are not represented by the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance. Chris, who are we missing?
Niche is part of Peak to Peak.
It is part of it. Oh, that's very good. I'm glad I was wrong on that. So, this is really already a pretty big, pretty representative consortium. But of course, I think it's always important for town staff to keep an eye out for other groups that perhaps are not part of peak-to-peak housing and human services, and either encourage them to join or encourage them to apply separately. Yes, I think the ordinance would call for the Board of Trustees to issue a resolution identifying how the funds are to be distributed. I believe we have our police force pretty well handled already, and so I'm pretty comfortable with going with a pretty high percentage out of that fund. And I'm feeling very comfortable with this, and I'm very glad we involved the Peak-to-Peak Housing and Human Services group.
Thank you, Julian. Lindsay?
You know, it's funny because I had this feeling that we were already doing this. I wasn't aware that we hadn't already allocated that money to different things, because I know it was important to make sure that we had money for enforcement. Do we know how much we've spent in the last few years on enforcement?
I guess we really need to narrow that down, because yes, I mean, when Rita's rolled up version, there's of course kind of all like full expenses for law enforcement. It would be nice to know, Trustee Danforth, like exactly what you're talking about. Are you talking about like personnel expenses?
I mean, I think any additional expenses that were incurred in enforcing licensing, inspections, you know, anything like that was incurred, are we covering those currently with those funds?
Total law enforcement. Yeah, so actually in terms of short-term rentals, we have not had complaints. And so there hasn't been any, you know, we've had some handful of complaints, but they've been able to be handled administratively, which was always the goal, versus going straight to a citation. We have not had to do any citations for any short-term rentals, nor have we had to launch into in-person reviews. They do sign a notarized self-inspection form, but we have not had any issues with the short-term rentals that we currently have registered.
Okay. And yeah, I don't know why I swear that we've had these conversations about what we intended that money to go for, and I'm going to go back and see if I can hunt down those minutes, because I know that we had conversations about health and human services, and you know, the money that's coming in from short-term rentals should go towards you know, the people who might be impacted by the presence of short-term rentals, such as increasing rents, and you know, having everything be a little bit more expensive up here. So being able to support the people that are displaced by the increasing costs in our town, I think is great. So I'm certainly in favor of that, and I don't know why I thought we had already, you know, agreed on this. So I'm glad that it's now before us.
So Trustee Danforth, and perhaps it's when you created this list of programs and activities. I know that there was a lot of discussion that went into this list of what it could be used for. I do recall that it had yet to be determined exactly how the funds would be distributed. I know that the Peak to Peak has been looking at this for a little while. I think it's this kind of part B, that how determine the allocation of revenue, that had never been solidified. So at this point, it's just a growing fund.
Okay.
And I do think also a part of that was it did take a little while. The way in which occupational tax is paid is that it's not due. So like Q1, which would be January through March, is not due until the end of June. So it was a really slow trickle to even get the first year's worth. We're officially at the first year's worth of funds. So I do think there was benefit in allowing it to build up the way it did prior to spending.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Jonathan?
I have no questions. I think there was long discussions, and I was a little bit more on the side of more of this money going toward, I guess, law enforcement and code compliance and helping shore up the gaps in the law enforcement. But being that we had agreed as a board to allocate the majority of these funds to health and human services, I could not think of a better group of nonprofits and kind of folks at the helm here choosing how to allocate these funds. I think they're way more tapped in than necessarily any of us on this board could be, or even town staff, simply because, as Julian alluded to, that is their profession. They are daily in the field dealing with the day-to-day changes and needs. And I wanted to thank Trustee App for suggesting that we maybe expedite this process in officiating this group as the group that decides and allocates these funds. And I'd also like to just point out the benefit that we have as a town of having such a large group of nonprofits that really shore up the gaps in, I guess, the municipal gaps that we may have in terms of health and human services, and just providing continuity to the community as a whole, and making sure that there are social safety nets and places to go and people to turn to when we all inevitably have troubles. So I'm in favor of this and would like to see this expedited and an action item very soon on the next agenda.
Thank you, Jonathan. I guess I have one question. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said here by everyone, but the one question I had was I saw in there that part of this is part of the funds transferred from the town to the Alliance is going to be used for administrative support, like $100 to $200 a month.
No, $100 to $200 total.
Oh, it says a month. Okay, because I was looking at that as a month, and I thought that that's like 35% of the total funds per year, and I thought that was a really high overhead. $100 to $200 total will go into it. Oh, okay. Well then, never mind my question. That's definitely something we just want to clear up. I see it in the middle of the screen saying $100 to $200, a month will go into the payroll as overhead.
Chris, is it perhaps the 3 to 7 hours? Is that per month, perhaps? Is that what that's referencing? It does say $100 and $200 a month will go to the food pantry payroll.
All we want to do is be able to facilitate administering it to the agencies that want it. And I don't think it will take 3 to 7 hours per month. I think it'll take 3. But it means that we're all still communicating with one another, which is a good thing.
So, but either way, we're still talking about of the $7,000, we're talking about more like, 6,500 of that will be going to those in need.
Correct.
Okay. And which also brings up the other question. I see in the final paragraph, it talks about spending transparency. And I'm just curious, what do you guys have in mind for letting the town residents know kind of where these tax dollars are being spent? Is there some kind of plan for like being able to say like 5,000 went for this, 1,000 for this, that kind of thing?
In our quarterly reports, we'll show you exactly where the money went. We won't use people's names because of confidentiality, but you'll know whether it went to housing, to education, to a utility bill, to a car payment, to whatever the request is.
Okay. Okay.
We'll let you know. We do it for every other place we report to.
Awesome. Okay, that's good. That really cleared up my big question there. And it sounds like the entire board is in favor of not only of doing this, but trying to do this as quickly as possible and getting these funds out the door. So I think, well, it is a discussion item, so I would like to open up to public comment, but I think I would like town staff to think if you've gotten everything you need from us to do that in a quick manner.
Are we leaning towards the 99% since the enforcement is minimal? Is that a fair assessment?
We will we'll bring that back to the board to weigh in after I call on public comment here, because discussion item. So if any members of the public would like to weigh in, now would be your chance. Catch our attention, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to comment on this. And I am not seeing or hearing any, so I'll bring it back to the board. And I would propose that, and from what I was hearing others say, I would say that we bring it back to the board with the 99%. And I would say to any trustee who feels, who has a different view or would like to see different language, speak up now. Otherwise, we will talk about this again in 2 weeks.
This is Trustee Taylor. I just want to note that the ordinance allows the Board of Trustees, requires the Board of Trustees to manage how these funds are allocated with advice from our health and human services community. And I think an interesting thing for us all to consider is how detailed do we want that resolution to be? I don't think we want, based on the wording of the ordinance, I don't think we want to say we're turning the money over to this group. I do think the resolution needs to be saying, with the advice of this group, the board has decided that the money will be allocated in the following ways. And then the group will allocate based upon that recommendation. So I think we have a little bit of perhaps discussion to decide how detailed we want to be, because I do believe that the Board of Trustees must have final authority on how the money is allocated. And certainly we listen to the advice of the Peak to Peak Housing and Health Human Services Alliance, but I think there's a kind of a fine point there as to how detailed do we get, because I do believe we the board, need to assign the allocation with some specificity. So that's all I'm considering. I'm not sure what the right answer to that is, but certainly I'll think about it a bit and I'll send in some suggestions.
I thought this was just at their discretion and they're distributing the money as they see the need, with quarterly reports letting us know how the money was spent. I'm not sure why we need to get too involved.
I'm going to need to go back over the ordinance and refresh my memory, because this is something I just thought of. But yeah, it could be that that's all we do. But I'm not going to discuss this because I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But I am going to think about it, and I might send in some suggestions, Miranda, and you may want to. Yeah, if you think that it has merit, maybe we can send that out to the general board and everybody can think about it.
Yeah, I think as we draft the resolution, will be worth discussing, because it'll adopt the rules and procedures for administrating the fund, but it goes over the expenditure of funds and any other rules and regulations that are deemed necessary for the effective use and disposition of funds. So it's pretty open-ended. It also talks about, if this is considered the advisory committee, what is the role and conduct of this committee, which I think would include kind of the reporting and potential oversight. So
yeah,
I'll work with. Go ahead.
I completely trust the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance, but I'm just wanting to. As I am recalling this ordinance, and as from when I went over it a couple of days ago, I came away from it feeling that the Board of Trustees was called upon to identify the allocation with some specificity, but not, maybe it is just handed over to them, but I don't think that's sufficient based on the ordinance. As I say, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to stop talking because I don't know what I'm talking about right now.
So can I chime in? This is Jennifer Madsen. And I think you can go about it either way. So there's options for you. You do have to, once per year, determine the allocation of revenue from the occupation tax on lodging services to the Health and Human Services Fund. So that is the allocation of percentage. How much do you want to go to this Health and Human Services Fund? And then the remaining would go to law enforcement services. And just for clarification, I know this was a question that came up, is what type of enforcement has been used for the short-term rentals. That enforcement would probably be related to the short-term rental fee, the license fee. So that would not come out of this occupation tax pot. And then you can adopt by resolution rules and procedures for administering the Health and Human Services Fund, such as an advisory committee or in the conduct of the advisory committee, and expenditures, more detail on the expenditures. You do not have to, though.
I think I was thinking about that wording relating to the board determines the allocation. I'm it's becoming clearer in my mind as I think about it. So we certainly could uh, designate a specific group, allocate that money, and then have that group distribute the funds and then report back to the Board of Trustees on a regular basis so we know what's happening and we have some oversight. But okay, so okay. It's becoming clearer in my mind. Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, I think town staff, do you have what you need from us?
Yes.
All right, very good. And Chris, I believe you're still on here. Thank you for bringing this to us, and we'll be doing this at our next meeting.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, moving on, our third discussion item, which is another one we were tackling last week. Miranda, summarize away.
Yes, I will. All right. So this is the fee schedule. We made some modifications based on the discussion from last week. The Board of Trustees was still going to discuss sign modification and liquor license modification of premise. So I'm going to skip those for now since you have not decided on that. There was also discussion about the variance application fee potentially being $300. So those are kind of 3 discussion items for tonight. But let me jump to the big area, which is park rentals. So we went ahead and first change was to make it where it was 1 to 19 people, where if it was 4 hours or less, their deposit and their rental fee were waived. And if it was the entire day, their rental fee was waived, but they paid a $50 deposit. Originally this said 1 to 20, which was an overlap. So now it's 1 to 19. Then for 5,000 to 900 or 9,999, the deposit is now staying at 2,500. And then there's a note here that we would then enter into lease agreements, which we haven't historically done for an event this size. And it would outline that the organizers could be billed for damages that exceed the deposit. Same for 10,000 plus events. We did reduce that to 2,500 with that same lease agreement. It should be noted though, as town staff, we do still feel like that should stay at 3,500 because that increase was actually only made in 2020. So in 2019, we provided that recommendation for 2020. I think it is best to keep that rate at 3,500. So I would ask that the Board of Trustees consider that tonight. And then I believe there are no other changes besides just kind of tightening up some language where it came reoccurring events. I added that that would only apply to events that were 1 to 19 people. So really before you, we're looking for you to discuss sign modification, liquor modification of premise, the variance application fee, and whether or not you support keeping the deposit for events of 10,000 plus at 3,500 instead of 2,500. So I don't know where you want to start, Mary Larson. I didn't necessarily start with the questions.
So actually, I think the way we do this is we can go through it. Well, I think we just tackle these one by one because otherwise it's just going to get complicated. So we'll have each board member, we'll start with the sign modification and weigh in if you believe it should be remain $50 for the fee or no fee, or if you have some other thought entirely and you want to convince the board of that. So we'll just kind of go through, each trustee can weigh in and we can see where we have agreement or not. If we're all in agreement on something, then we can be done and move on with it. So sign modification is the first one. I will weigh in. I think it's appropriate to have a $50 fee personally. Trustee Apt?
I agree.
Okay. Julian? Trustee Taylor?
I agree.
Jonathan? You're on mute still, Jonathan. Thought I saw you come off.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
My bad. I see no difference either way, but if town staff has suggested and feels it's appropriate, I will follow suit.
Okay, Trustee Corvallin?
I don't think we need to charge that.
Okay, and Trustee Danforth?
I think it's appropriate, and I'll go with town staff's recommendation.
Okay. Tanya, you're the outlier, I guess, the one who is speaking in favor of not charging $50. Do you want to make an argument to try and convince other board members, or move on to the liquor license modification of
Well, I don't think I'm going to convince anybody, but I would like to say that our business owners are burdened with a lot of expenses, a lot of fees, and incredibly high property taxes, and seems that this is just part of the job for town to approve a sign modification. This isn't like the new sign. We're talking about somebody who wants to change the color. Now they got to go pay $50. I know it's not a lot of money. I just think it's a gesture of poor will on the part of town that we aren't supporting our businesses, and we're just trying to like take as much money from them as possible at every move they do. That's how it looks to me.
All right. Thank you, Tanya.
I will note that Tanya's argument is persuasive, and I am thinking about it. Haven't changed my mind yet, but it's always worth it to hear the opposing argument.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also remind everyone, this is just a discussion item this evening. So we'll do kind of maybe another straw poll here at the end for how we want to direct town staff on each of these items. So this is kind of a chance to lay out our views, make an argument as Tanya just did, and then see if that changes anything. So liquor license modification of premise, there is no fee currently, and $150 is the state. Jonathan, you can start us on this one. Do you agree that the town should be charging a fee, or no?
For the liquor license change of premise?
Modification of premise.
Modification of premise. I guess I am a little bit persuaded also by Tanya's arguments that some of these things that we are assigning a fee to are well within the scope of work and parameters of the job requirements of our town staff. If we are not seeing town staff able to actually accomplish these things and see that there's an extra burden placed on them, I'm not against placing fees, but I have questions myself about, do these fees really need to be applied, or do they simply fall under the scope of the duties of our town staff?
All right. Tanya.
So wait, this is what the state charges the town, and we're just asking for them to reimburse us?
No, the state charges $150 for modification of premise. A lot of towns' codes for liquor mirror state codes, which is
So
why.
are they paying the $150 to the state of Colorado, and then we're just asking them to do it again for us? How many hours does it take your typical modification? What I would think when the knotted root changed their patio a little bit, that would be considered a modification of premise.
So Knotted Root actually doesn't have a liquor license because they're a brewery, so it's a different type of license type.
Oh, okay.
So
Like how many, does it take you a long time?
Busey Brews is the example that recently came. So it's not only town staff, it's actually the Board of Trustees as well. So those take approximately 5 hours to pull together all of the appropriate documentation and to do the analysis. Because not only are you preparing the documents for the Board of Trustees, but also you have to sign off on all of the state paperwork, and the state won't issue without local confirmation that we are approving it.
Okay. Well,
do I remember part of the
I
Sorry, go
just
ahead,
don't remember
Tanya.
talking about Busey Brews as a board of trustee only for the variance on the parking.
So they came forward for their beer garden, and there was a liquor license hearing for them to include their beer garden as a part of their liquor boundary, because currently it is not. At the time, it was covered under a temporary modification of premise, but they were looking to make it permanent.
Okay. I just don't remember that. Okay. Well, I don't think you should count our time because we're not really getting paid, but your time, if it took you 5 hours to do that, then I suppose maybe a $75 charge would be a little more reasonable. But again, I'm in the favor of trying to help our businesses succeed. So I would probably say just not have it, but that's me.
Just, yeah, thank you, Tanya. Just a little clarification. I remember a discussion we had on this last week. Is part of it the fact that we have to involve the town attorney?
So we typically involve town attorney. The variances is the bigger component here. While we have involved Jennifer in the past, and so this fee would offset. I think the reason this is before you is that Jennifer did support with Busey Brews as well as all of those variances, and those were fees town just had to absorb because there was no cost to the applicant. Where typically, if there's a application, it's considered a pass-through cost where it's deducted out of escrow, but there's now been 4 applications before the Board of Trustees where attorney time was absorbed entirely by town.
And just to be clear, those 4 times the attorney came was because of modification of premises.
Not just modification of premises, it was also for the variances. So it's these
let's
2.
talk about that when we talk about the variance. But typically the attorney would not be involved for a modification of premise.
Typically that could be handled administratively, yes.
Gotcha.
I mean, of course, there's discretion in where town staff would connect with the attorney, but like.
I think we lost your microphone, Miranda. Either that or you guys lost me again.
I can hear you. I can't hear Miranda anymore.
You're still here. It was Miranda that went
It was
down.
Miranda. Okay, yep. I'm getting the Miranda's bad connection now. We lost her content share. All right, yeah, we'll come back. We'll just keep kind of going on people's views on this fee. Lindsay, you're next up the list.
Yeah, I just was quickly looking at what other cities do in this situation, and City of Boulder has fees that they charge, but they're less than what the state charges. So for their permanent modifications, the liquor license is $150, or state is $150, city is $100. Then they have temporary modifications, and that's $50 then. So they're a little less. So, again, I don't want us to be the highest of everything. We already have some of the highest water and sewer rates and everything. And, I think we should just be in line, with what we're seeing around us. So I would be in favor of matching Boulder's. So the liquor license modification, the city application fee being $100 for permanent modifications and $50 for temporary modifications.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Alan?
I agree with Lindsay.
Okay. Julian?
Yeah, I think I really appreciate Tanya's concerns on this, and I think Lindsay's solution seems appropriate here. I think that matches up what we're hearing town staff is doing, and yeah, covers our key fees, our key costs, and doesn't cost too much. So yes, rather than simply blanket matching the state, I like Lindsay's proposal.
Okay. Yeah, I agree as well. And keep kind of vamping here while Miranda tries to call back in. And I'm taking notes that we'll be able to get these to her. Jonathan, Tanya, you guys spoke first on this one. You've now heard a different idea. Do you guys want to weigh in on that before we move on to the next topic? This idea of the reduced fee of 100.
I like that solution that Lindsay proposed. I think it's reasonable, and I'm aware that town staff is very, very burdened and at times is not paid well enough for the amount of work that they actually do. Very well aware of that. So I appreciate town staff bringing this forward. I just do hear Tanya's argument that our businesses are already burdened and at times more burdened than businesses in the city of Boulder or Boulder County unincorporated in terms of fees.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. I mean, to compromise.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Moving ahead then into the variance application fee and escrow. And this is one, I believe, Tanya, you suggested increasing to $300 from $250.
Well,
let
me backpedal, because I think when I was talking about the modification of premise, I was saying I just don't see why we need to charge that at all. And then I went on to say the variance applications are a huge time burden that require the lawyer, this and that, and I'd even be okay with it going up to $300. But I don't really necessarily think, I think 250 is fine. I mean,
okay,
that's what Miranda thought was a good number. I think that's fine.
Okay. How about you, Julian?
I agree.
Okay,
with
staying
Tanya.
at 250?
Yeah, and with
Yep.
town staff. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Trustee Apt?
I also agree.
Okay. Lindsay?
Yes, I agree.
Jonathan?
I'm fine with that. That sounds good.
All right. And what was the one final item we were discussing, or town staff asked us to look at again, was the idea of the very large events, keeping those at $3,500 in deposit instead of $2,500. Yeah, personally, I guess I'll start with this one again. I would agree with town staff here. You know, if you have an event of 10,000 people, then that seems appropriate to have a little bit more of a deposit than for an event half that size. Jonathan?
Sorry, I was slightly distracted. Could you repeat that, Mr. Mayor?
We're looking at the large events, or basically not changing the fees from the current fee schedule. So keeping largest events at $3,500 instead of reducing them to $2,500 for the deposit.
You know, I guess I would more be in favor of reducing those events to $2,500 in the current kind of global situation, especially natural situation, that these events may have to pay that deposit, and then situations are changing so rapidly we might end up turning around and bringing a mandate to have to cancel that event. I also think with those large events, when we're getting into that 10,000 people range, that it's kind of hard to really determine if that many people are actually going to show up. And I think in the event this is the deposit that's intended to be refunded, the more we can do to help encourage these events in this town for the people who put the time and the effort in, and those aspects of our community that enjoy these events, that as a town we should encourage that. And I think requiring an extra $1,000 in the deposit can actually help to hinder that. Might not seem like a lot of money, but when you're dealing with these events and you maybe only do it once a year, it is the difference between another security person and a traffic person, or potentially another artist. So I would advocate for actually keeping it at the $2,500.
Okay. Trustee Danforth.
So the history of this was just, we increased it just last year, right?
You increased it. Hello, I'm back. You increased it for the 2020 budget. So 2019, we recommended that for the 2020 budget, you increase that to $3,500. So that's been the fee for the last 2 years. Because we do have concern about, we recognize that 10,000 was, of course, definitely a high and pretty aggressive fee, but to go backwards from what has historically been charged, We didn't feel that that was appropriate because that was just such a recent change to go to 3,500.
Okay.
So Lindsay, are you coming down more on the side of 25 or 35?
I'm not quite sure at the moment.
Yeah. All right. Trustee Apt?
I appreciate Jonathan's concerns and other people's concerns, but that's 10,000 people is a lot of people, and that's a potential, need for a lot of resources, I guess is how I see it. And I think that's a reasonable fee, and we've done a good job of saying, if all goes well, you get it back. So it's, refundable. Is that correct, Miranda?
Yes, that's correct.
So I think we should stay with 3,500 for that magnitude of a crowd.
Julian?
It's a tough one. We're making a guess based upon our best experience, and my tendency in a case like this, where I myself can't come down hard on one side or the other, is going to be to go along with staff recommendation. So I'm going with staff recommendation on this one.
Okay. Tanya?
Wouldn't the insurance for the festival cover damages in excess of 2,500? Are you worried that they wouldn't pay if you didn't have the deposit? That they would just skip out on it?
I think it would really depend on how that insurance claim were to unfold. We haven't ever done an insurance claim against the event organizer's insurance. I think the intention 2 years ago when that was increased to 3,500 was, again, to what Trustee App said. That's a substantial amount of people. That's almost 5 times or just shy of how many people live in Nederland. And so it just felt that we needed to be prepared to, if necessary, of course, to be able to deduct from that because of damages to the public facility that was rented. More often than not, we do see that deposits are being returned in their entirety. But yes, that is, and I think Chris Peltier spoke to this last week, and that, the goal, of course, for any event organizer would ideally be to get their whole deposit back, but this provides that a little bit of that financial reassurance that should there be damages, we already are in possession of the funds to do the work needed and then return whatever, minus the work done, return whatever that difference.
So in the history of NetFest or Frozen Ndda Days, have you kept deposits?
Yes, they have kept deposits and for Frozen Ndda Days, but deposits weren't at this rate. So when we moved it to 3,500, that would been the first year that Frozen Ndda Days would have been charged that. They did end up paying it, but because the 2020 event was canceled, we returned the funds with the exception of the fee cost to print the liquor license posters. But we did return that. However, they had paid it going into that event.
Right. But like the year prior, did you guys keep the entire deposit or was it just a part of it?
I wasn't here then, so I'd have to do a little research about what years, and if that's a desire, we can do that before the next meeting.
I'm curious, like how often deposits are returned and for what reasons deposits are kept.
Yep, sure.
I mean, I understand wanting the cash on hand to fix things quickly because insurance claims can take weeks, if not months, to get the money. So, I mean, I'm personally in favor of just leaving it at 2,500, but I think compared to what you proposed last week, it's a lot better. So I'm certainly happy about that. And that's it.
Thank you, Tanya. So, okay, so before, this is a discussion item again, so I'm going to open the floor up to public comment, but then I'll just say what we'll do is then we'll come back again and kind of try to find some board agreement on these. I think for some of these, we've certainly already reached it. And on one or two, we have either disagreement or not a significant majority one side or the other, or arguments have been made that may have swayed the views. So then we'll just go down through one by one again and summarize what we found and heard and give staff direction. But first, we'll open this up to public comment. So anyone from the public who would like to comment on the 4 items of the fee schedule we're discussing this evening that you've been listening to us, now would be your chance. You know the drill. Catch our attention, 3 minutes, and the floor would be yours.
Come on. Hello?
Yes.
Kathleen Chipai, 30-year resident, East Magnolia, 18-year business owner. I believe that the fee for the festivals, Amanda clarified it for all of us last week, and so did Deb, that the full amount of the fee, $2,500, had only been kept once, the year that Chipeta Park was used, and it was a mud bath because it was a very wet time period that year. So I don't believe that the fee should be raised. I'm still questioning how Frozen Dead Guy for next year was already charged over $13,000 this year. So I haven't heard any discussion about that tonight, and that's just, I feel like they should be refunded whatever amount is not what the fee is currently, which is apparently $3,500. And since $3,500 was the fee just for this time, I think it should be lowered back to $2,500 because it is a deposit. It is meant to be returned, and I'm really disheartened on the fact that BOT thinks that people like that throw these festivals, like Amanda and like Deb, are going to just trash the community and leave. I don't even know what we're talking about. Leave. Deb's not moving away. Amanda's not moving away. We have to see these people. They have no malintent whatsoever, but you guys all talk about them as if there is some malintent, and that's really disheartening for me and the rest of the community who doesn't have the ability to call in and say what they want because they don't want to be put on a hit list like I am. So I just want to say that it should be back to $2,500, and I'm for reimbursing the 2022 Frozen Dead Guy committee over $10,000 for what they've already prepaid now, and you took advantage of them, in my opinion, because you knew they got the grant money, a 6-figure grant money from a COVID grant. So I'm really disheartened in all of this discussion, and I'm still questioning why the Adopt a Park bench, which no one has talked about, is going from $50, which is the cost of screwing the screws in per Miranda, $50 to $1,000. And that is also just sickening for me to think about that at this time in things we're going to do that. And I think the park benches, by the way, the plaques, I think we should be covering our benches with plaques. I don't think that we just have to limit it to one little plaque per bench. These are all plaques of people in our community. We want to remember them by. So I still don't understand why nobody even questions I don't understand why Public Works is trying to make a profit off of the loss of somebody who is valued in our community. So I'm discouraged by these discussions.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
I'd like.
Any other members of the public? Okay, bring this back to the board. So
I had a question about the benches.
Okay.
We're just putting a plaque on the bench. We're not giving a new bench for $1,000. I kind of thought it was like giving a new bench for $1,000.
I think that the person could decide. So the way the program is they could either bring in a bench or they could adopt one that we already have. It
But
was
like, we're
ProSab,
providing the bench for $1,000?
right? So it was ProSab's recommendation that $1,000 be charged so that that funds could go into continuing to develop our parks, and that it's not typical, that they were concerned that we were basically just giving benches away for this placking and adopting for free. That typically when you adopt something, there's a financial compensation to go into bettering the area in which the bench belongs. And that's why ProSab is recommending we move forward with a fee of $1,000 for that.
That does seem pretty high for not even providing a brand new bench, but.
Well, funny enough, I have to apologize to the rest of the BOT. I actually fell asleep in my armchair last BOT meeting and didn't wake up till 1:43 to see a bunch of texts wondering what happened to me. This was something I was going to bring up because while it is ProSap's recommendation that this be $1,000, the best reasoning provided was this is what other towns charge. Now, from the perspective of previous landscaper, current builder, I cannot fathom how it would cost Public Works $1,000 to install one of these planquettes. From the perspective of an individual looking and glad that ProSab has finally actually established a procedure to formally allow individuals to adopt benches and make them memorials. I am wondering how $1,000 seems appropriate from the perspective that these benches are already provided by town, would sit there as just a green bench with nothing. And it seems that the cost of this should be directly correlated to the, I guess, supplier of the planquettes, if there is a standardization to it. And it's my understanding during my time on ProSab that we were not allowing custom benches to be done because of the fear of ongoing maintenance. Like if you were to install a flagstone bench and that flagstone bench was vandalized, whose responsibility would it fall on? And it seems like the $1,000 is saying you pay the $1,000 and then Public Works will 100% maintain this. I guess I would be interested in wondering if there are folks that are interested in adopting a bench, putting a plaquette on it, making it a memorial, as well as being the individual that upkeeps that memorial. Are they still going to be charged $1,000 simply to memorialize a member of the community that they cared for and that the community cared for, and to have Public Works, I don't know, look over that town asset? It seems the town has already spent the money, would spend the money, and the only change to the bench is the plaquette.
So I think the kind of the two things here is this 1,000 isn't necessarily meant to kind of cover Public Works time, because as I previously stated, it takes them about an hour to install the plaque if it's being given to us. The way in which ProSab viewed this $1,000 is that it's in the form of a donation to ideally a parks department. It's a form of providing financial support to bettering our parks and open space. Versus just kind of giving benches for free. They felt like there should be a financial compensation, especially since we are limited in benches, because there should be some sort of financial donation for it being a part of this program. Now, the way in which the Adopt a Bench guidelines read is that the person who adopts a plaque, we ask that they look over the bench in the sense of identifying if there are any issues, but it would be Public Works' responsibility for fixing and addressing those issues. But we ask that they visit their bench often so that there's that continuous reporting. Of course, our team's always around, but it's just helpful to have an extra set of eyes, especially if someone were to dedicate that bench to their loved one.
But these are just benches that we already have in the park. You're not providing these people with a brand new bench, am I right?
It's their choice. And so they can adopt a current bench or they can purchase a new bench. But the way in which the current program reads is that if they were to purchase a new bench, that would be a pass-through cost, that we would purchase the bench, but they would then reimburse us for that cost.
Oh, well, I'm going to propose that we lower the cost of this adopted bench. I think what communities are charging $1,000? I mean, Vale or Aspen, you know, tell me the community that's charging $1,000.
There's only a handful. Let me pull it up. There's only a handful who actually have this type of program. So sorry, I didn't put that in the aim. Let me grab it.
So what are you proposing, Tanya?
I don't know, like $200.
Okay, there's a proposal on the table.
It seems like a donation.
I'd
Okay.
find that far more reasonable. Logic behind ProSab is to look for a donation, and because there are only so many benches, reality is when we look at who these benches have been dedicated to, it's been tragedies or long-standing community members who were a part of this community for a great amount of time, and that I think it means far more for our parks to demonstrate that we are a community that cares and loves for one another and remembers those that have passed on and their contribution to the community than to get $800 for a parks department, which is largely as much as we're finally going to actually give them a full-time staff member, is undefined. We don't have a parks maintenance and master plan. We don't have procedures. We don't have things that we have been working on since the 2010 Gateway Park master plan. Things that are demonstrated in that 280-page book, goals that are clearly outlined. And so to start charging money as a donation for a parks department that hasn't defined what it's actually going to be, I would say is, again, putting the cart before the horse. So I would agree with Tanya and advocate that this be 200, if not even 150. If folks
150.
want to donate to the Nederland Parks Department, my suggestion for this board and ProSab is that it's high time we actually give some definition to our parks maintenance plans and actually have a plan for which the allocation of this money could then be put toward. Otherwise, we're just kind of asking for money to float in the air for maybe this BOT or ProSab to one day make a recommendation on. We still have $35,000 floating in the air from renting out Eldora 4 years ago. And it largely hasn't been used because it's hopes and dreams of master park plans. So
Just Mary Louise, and I just wanted to offer, just so so municipalities actually charge a substantial amount of money for these programs. Crested Butte was 1,000, Cherry Hills was 1,000 to 1,500, Boulder County is 3,000, Aurora is 2,650. And we realize that two of those are obviously much larger, but we felt like the lower end. But it is pretty common to look at 1,500 plus for this type of program.
Well, still, I think I agree with Jonathan. We can talk to the rest of the board on this. 150.
Oh, you dropped to 150.
I like that, yeah. But 200 or 150.
Okay. So we're talking just the benches here now. We've heard from Tanya and Jonathan. Alan?
Yes, I would. I prefer 200. I guess I should have asked this question a while ago, and maybe this has already been determined. But are we talking about existing benches that have already been built, and then somebody's just dedicating them? Or are we talking about building a bench from scratch?
So we don't, it's important for us to have the graffiti resistant benches. Again, they can either choose, we've got about 20 benches now that people could choose from, or if they were really passionate about a new bench because they want a very specific area, then they could choose to pay for their own, but we would still keep it to the graffiti resistant benches.
Okay, so we're looking at existing benches where they put a plaque on it, essentially.
Correct.
Okay. I could support 200.
Okay. Julian?
So considering this from the standpoint of a free market, we're talking about a limited resource. And in a case where we have a limited resource and high demand, we raise the price in order to try to balance the resource availability against demand. It doesn't sound to me like we have a high demand for the benches, and it doesn't sound like that demand has been leading to benches that are dedicated in ways that are frivolous. My feeling would be, considering what we have done in the past and how it has worked so far, I'd be all for leaving it the way it is at $50.
All
But
right.
if we wanted to talk, if we wanted to talk 200, that's fine. I mean, I understand that it may be appropriate for the board to think, well, let's imagine that everybody finds out about this and now everybody is wanting to put a plaque on the bench for Aunt Zelda. And then there are arguments about whose aunt gets on the bench. Then we'd have to say, well, boy, this is not working. But so far, this has been working. And I understand ProSab's recommendation, and I understand that that was a sincere recommendation based on data. But it doesn't sound like we're in a position where we have to regulate this market at all. So my feeling would be, I don't think it's broken, and we may not need to fix it. That's my thought at this point.
I do just want to offer a point of clarification that so currently the fee schedule does not have any fee listed for the Adopt-A-Bench. The $50 is to cover 1 hour of public works time. So
Okay.
if you left it as is, that just means that the Adopt-A-Bench program would still not be listed as its own line item on the fee schedule.
Oh, I think it needs to be a line item. I think it needs to be a fee. But if we have been happy with $50 up until now, and we don't have an argument that the market is starting to surge for benches, and we may run out of benches, if that is the current case, I'd say we stick with $50.
So it would then be $100 though. So if the bench itself was a $50, we would still charge public works time at $50 unless the board was requesting that be waived for the Adopt-A-Bench fee. And I guess just to put it in perspective, I do think Trustee Taylor brings up some good points. I believe that we have about 5 benches dedicated, leaving 15 of our current. Of course, with the GoCo grant, there will be 20 plus benches added. So there's definitely that consideration there. I guess I would just look, if it was to be reduced to any fee, just an acknowledgement that there still is that public works time for installing the sign itself.
Absolutely. That's fine. And so again, I can see value in saying we're going to have a bunch of benches. So let's make sure that we require a kind of an earnest money for this. Are you serious, or was Aunt Zelda really that great? So I'm all for the lower price. It looks, Miranda, like you're setting $100 as a lower limit, and I'm okay with that. And if we were to move to $1,000, then what I would want to see from ProSab would be kind of a plan for what are we doing with everything above and beyond that $100. Are they establishing a fund that ProSab would maintain, and that they would be able to disperse from that fund in order to enhance our parks? If we had a plan of that sort, then I'd feel much more comfortable about treating this like a legacy, right? Treating this like $1,000 because you're investing in a legacy for this great person. And but without a plan of that sort, I think we really are seeing that the market is not overrunning our supply. And so $100, $150, I'm feeling okay with that.
Okay. Lindsay?
I think Julian's brought up some good points. Especially if we're going to have so many benches in the near future, we're going to have quite the supply of them. And I think having a small fee for the dedication to cover the time of staff, I think that makes sense. I'm in favor of a smaller fee. Like the $50 seems great.
So to clarify, what we're saying with the low fee is our benches dedicated are first come, first serve.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yep.
If we say we're charging $1,000, in a sense, That may not be bad if we have a real plan for what we're doing with that $1,000 and how we're going to use that to assure that we maintain that legacy for this great person in the state that is appropriate.
Mhm. I have one
I
final
think
question.
maybe with,
Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was just gonna say, I think with the application and the fee, that maybe we could have a separate line item for additional donation, you know, that if they wanted to donate to parks, would they be able to do something like that? Are we allowed to take donations?
I want to clear. So ProSep actually brought this up historically about a donation, and that was back when Jen Hagee was our treasurer, and I'm not sure we ever picked it up with Rita. I'd like to talk with her about that.
I mean, let's set this at the low fee now, and let's leave it open to ProSab to suggest a not a first come, first serve, but a legacy program. And that might be really appealing, and we may amend this at that time.
I have one clarification question. With regards to these plaques, who's buying the plaque? Who pays for a plaque?
It really depends. Again, it's whether, so we've had some situations where the person has wanted us to order it and then we just bill them directly for the cost as a pass through. There are other people who want to make their own. We don't have a design standard when it comes to plaques. So if you go down and look at Jeff Austin, it's a small little metal plaque versus Keith Larson is a very large wooden engraved plaque. So ProSub is looking into design standards, but we really leave it open-ended if the person wants to supply their own or if they want us to make it. The one thing we always require though is town staff to install so that we can make sure that it's secured appropriately.
Okay.
And how long do these dedications last? Like, is there a time frame, number of years?
There is not in the current guidelines, so it's really the life of the bench.
The second law of thermodynamics establishes the life of the bench.
Yeah, there's no guideline, you know. So in my time here, I've processed 3. I would say it's not that people don't want it. It was also a program that we've recognized amongst ProSab is not promoted well enough. A lot of people don't realize it's an option. And so there is a desire to do kind of marketing around it. Of course, once a fee has been set.
I think it sounds like we're all fairly well in agreement of lowering this cost to, let's say, $100 to cover town staff time, since the pass-through cost of the plaques itself is not included in that. The one other comment I would make on this, that we're kind of getting distracted by the plaques and adopt-a-benches. When ProSab is looking at design standards, we should probably look too at something about, I guess, just, is there any oversight on what kind of adoption of a bench there is? It's great. We talk about, the ones we have in town for, long-term residents, things like that. But what if someone comes and just wants to put a giant QAnon plaque for $100 on one of our town benches? Do we have any oversight and way to say no?
Yeah,
but that's a policy position.
And currently in the application, it does say that it has to be reviewed by the town clerk and the public works manager. There was at one point in time a ProSab liaison, but that did really delay the process since they only meet once a month. So it was changed where the town clerk would work with public works manager to approve.
Okay, just wanted to check on that. So I think the $100 a bench, it sounds like we're all in agreement of bringing that down to a lower amount to encourage that. But we need to circle back to the topics we were going to discuss. And let's just take it from the top again and see if we have a common agreement on how to move this forward. The sign modification fee, when we left that, it was strongly in favor. So I'm just going to go down. We've heard arguments on various sides. So we'll begin here with Tanya. You can be the first one to say whether you think it should be $50 or not. Not. Okay. And Lindsay?
I think keep it.
Keep it. Alan?
Keep it.
Jonathan, Julian?
No, I'm okay with 0. Thanks, Tanya.
Okay, Jonathan?
I'll go with 0 as well.
All right. I'm gonna go with 0 to break a tie because, yeah. So we'll go, that's 4 people saying 0, 2 for 50. So we'll set that one in our fee schedule. We'll keep that at 0. The second one, the modification of premise, the 150 here. We've heard our discussions, what we should charge, and I think this was the one, Lindsay had the proposal of a permanent modification of premise would be a $100 charge, a temporary $50 charge. Lindsay, do you still stand by that?
Yes, and that's what matches what's at City of Boulder.
Right. Okay. Julian?
I agree with Dan, Lindsay.
Okay. Jonathan? You're muted, Jonathan.
Oh, my phone did not respond. I'm in agreement with Lindsay. I think that's a fair compromise.
Okay. Tanya?
Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay. Alan? And I agree as
The Lindsay
well.
compromise.
Okay. And the variance application fee and escrow, the next one on the list, I believe we were having the discussion as to whether that should be raised to $300 or remain at $250. Julian?
At 250.
Tanya?
250.
Alan?
I agree.
Jonathan?
250.
Lindsay?
Yep, 250.
250 it is. All right. Last one is the deposit for large events, 2,500 or 3,500. Alan?
3,500.
Jonathan?
2,500.
Lindsay?
3,500.
Tanya?
2,500.
Julian?
2,500.
Ooh, and here I go. I was going to say 3,500, so that's a 3-3. Town staff, is it all right? Can we, I mean, we're going to adopt this. Is it, you know, we do have one trustee missing from this evening. Did you need final input on us? Because this is just a discussion item. Did you need final input, or can we
Yeah, no.
make that change at the end?
No, and Trustee Coombs Ismail actually was the one to recommend 2,500, so I would maybe argue that that's the route to go. I mean, I think as town staff, well, we definitely, our recommendation was we didn't feel like going backwards made sense. The one thing we do feel comfortable with is knowing that there will be lease agreements allowing additional billable, allowing us to bill for damages if needed. As long as that stays, we feel comfortable.
All right, I'm going to change mine then to 2,500 so that we have majority is there as well.
Okay.
And I believe that is all the items.
Can I take you to adopt a bench? I just need the clarification on if it's $100 fee, does that mean you do not want Public Works to charge their separate hourly rate, that the $100 is encompassing of our staff's time? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that makes it the cleanest as well. So we're not having 50 here, 50 there. It's just one number.
Sounds
So
good.
I would also like to propose that we discuss with ProSab the possibility of an actual legacy plan, where if we're going to do this, it would be nice to have a proposal from them that involves where the excess funds go and how those excess funds are distributed in order to support the goals of the Adopt a Bench program. And they may still come back with $1,000, I don't know, but it would be nice to see an entire plan from them that we could review and approve.
They actually meet on Thursday, and I let them know that we'd like to add this to the agenda. So we should be able to come back with that information.
Thank you. I'm not against turning this into something where this is and as to rules, I think the rules should be this is a person and not I think well, they need to set up the rules as well. So yeah.
All right. Moving forward into our reports portion of the evening. And we will kick this off with our town administrator, Miranda.
I wanted to offer this reminder to the Board of Trustees that I had sent out a couple emails about this because these are late nights for our town staff who are around all day. The new agreement is that if they submitted reports in writing, that they would not have to stay on until 10 plus late at night. So I think all you have on tonight is myself and Macy. And in our packets in the packet are all of our reports. And so I think we just kind of open it up to just questions versus individual review of those reports. Marshall Johns and Don Baumhover have been kind of out intermittently over the last month. So they have asked to do 2 months of a report in December, which is why you don't see theirs. So rather than reviewing them all, Mayor Larson, I just was hoping to open it up to just any questions the board may have on staff reports.
That sounds very good. I always appreciate the depth you guys put into the written reports. So I think this is a great thing, and I'm really appreciative of letting our town staff not hang out with us into these late nights and letting them, spend time with their families or take a nap, whichever they choose.
I figure if they didn't have to be here for other things, these are really long meetings to just give a 2-minute presentation. So
absolutely,
no board member is hugely opposed to that. I do agree they put a lot of information, and more often than not don't have much to add than what's in writing in their report.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll just kind of give everyone an opportunity here, beginning with you, Julian. Do you have any questions or comments regarding any of the staff reports that are in the packet this week?
No questions. They're very thorough.
Okay. Alan?
I do not.
Okay.
Well done.
Jonathan?
No questions. As always, just appreciate the time town staff puts in and the effort they put into not only their jobs, but making sure that they are transparent as possible.
Sure. Tanya?
Do I have questions for the board? No.
Okay. Lindsay?
No questions.
All right. Testament to how well written they are and how complete they are. Thank you, Miranda, and to all of the town staff who are not here with us this evening. In the nature of trying to keep this quick, I'm going to just quickly highlight a few things that meetings I've been having and things that are ongoing that I want people to know about. First, I want to thank Tanya, yourself, and Eric, who joined, as well as the other members of the Big Spring Committee who joined us last week. We had a quick update on kind of where things are, and just for everyone to know, in terms of the Big Springs egress, our funding is still at the mercy of the U.S. government. It is in the federal budget that passed the House, and it'll all depend on what happens in the Senate in December. That budget is getting caught up with all the other things that are going on in DC, plus the debt limit again, and the continuing resolution ending in mid-December. There's still hope that there'll be minibuses that'll include the funding, but honestly, that hope's fading by the day. I don't think we'll be seeing this funding next year as we'd hoped. So the Big Springs egress is kind of stalled out while looking for potential other funding sources. I've taken a couple other interesting meetings lately. Some of these are actually things that have come up in the last week that I will be having the meeting later this week. I'm meeting with a representative of the, I've forgotten what it's called now, but the Cross Mine, our mines up at Caribou. I've finally managed to reach out and make contact with some of their leadership team, and so I'll be having a talk with them on Friday. I've also had reached out a group that is interested in possibly bringing a dental practice to Nederland, and had some questions about the town and things like that. So I have a meeting set up with them later, and I'll let you guys know if that looks like that might happen. It sounds like it might be, might only be like the dental hygienist level, but at least teeth cleanings, if not more serious dental health options. And finally, on Friday, I will be having one of my usual meetings with Congressman Neguse. And at that point, I'm going to be trying to get some information and find out more details on how we can better position the town to get some of the funding in the infrastructure bill that just passed or was just signed yesterday at the White House, and things we can do both in terms of transportation, clean energy, and broadband. So there we go. Jonathan, how about yourself?
Very little to report. I was unable to attend the last DDA meeting, and I believe we appointed the newest member tonight. I have one thing to bring up in other business, but it is more related to other business than a report. So,
Okay. Trustee Apt?
Yeah, just I sent out some emails to the board about the mine, so this can be a topic when you meet with them. And they were just, the state of Colorado just filed a notice of violation against the mine for what they have been emitting into the watershed. They're not keeping up with their permit in terms of what they need to remove from their emissions, their liquid emissions. So anyway, you'll get more information about that. I'm sure it'll be in the media as well. So I think it's a good thing that they'll be held to a new standard since they've been in violation for approximately 5 years. And other thing I already said in my report is, getting an implementation resolution for appointing guardians for the watershed, not related to the mine. And one personal announcement I wanted to make is due to 2 major book projects I have coming up in the spring, I'm going to call it good at the end of this year when I've got 4.5 years in as a Board of Trustees member. So I've got 2 more meetings to go in December, and then I will be resigning my position rather than hanging around till April. Because I got appointed and then I got elected, I ended up serving more than 4 years, and so I'm going to have to call it good at that, and I've certainly enjoyed it, and I'll miss you guys, but I'll be hanging around in the wings to keep track of what's going on.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Tanya, Trustee Corvallin?
We had a meeting with the EcoPass, and I mean, I don't know if you guys remember that EcoPass RTD changed their the way they charge us from being just kind of like a flat fee to a per use. Every time somebody uses an EcoPass, it's adds up and they tally it. And so we were looking at a pretty big deficit to start happening this year, but because ridership was down because of COVID, we are still looking good. The concern is when it goes back to normal, we're going to be needing to bring it back up for increasing the fee to EcoPass taxpayer district people. But the hope is that Polis wants to do a free public transportation for everybody during peak ozone months. So I think it's like May through September. And it's just something he's proposed. It's not a done deal, but that would start next May. And if that happened, then that would save us, because then through May through September, nobody's going to be charged and no one's going to be using the EcoPass. So then we won't have that much ridership being clicked. So we'll still be good. So we'll see. If not, EcoPass is going to need to get more money. But I think hopefully this will pass, or whatever he has to do to make that happen. So that's it.
That's actually a lot of good news about the EcoPass. I mean, bad news, the ridership's down, but good news that we're dodging that bullet for a little bit longer. Yeah. All right. Trustee Danforth.
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay. Trustee Taylor.
Planning Commission, pretty dull. Of late, they rearranged their meetings, canceled the meeting for November. Then they reviewed the PC bylaws. They're changing their bylaws to conform a little closer to other advisory boards' bylaws, and to some degree also a little closer to the BOT's bylaws. And then they reviewed the building code, which we have just reviewed. That's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank all of you for all the extra work you're putting in and keeping us up to date. Coming to other business, Jonathan, you tipped your hand. What you got for us?
Yeah, so I believe some of the rest of the BOT members might have seen an email in their BOT box titled "In Defense of Bears." It has been sent to us a few times, and I got the opportunity to meet with this concerned couple. They actually live out on Hall Road, but essentially they were petitioning the BOT, members of the BOT, to advocate for the town of Nederland passing an ordinance that actually requires that trash, recycling, any basically pretty much trash and recycling be kept in bear-proof containers. And while this is a practice that most of our residents do just out of their own self-interest, not to have to pick up trash and recycling from their property, they were hoping to see the town of Nederland actually officially adopt an ordinance. So through the meeting I had with them, they were very, very kind couple that provided not only a lot of data, but also 5 different other cities' ordinances, and kind of went into depth in the discussion about why they believed this was necessary. My discussion kind of largely revolved around that a lot of the times the issues that we see in this area is actually Ridge Road, Magnolia, Hall Road, which they agreed. However, I responded to their request, whereas nobody on the Boulder County Commissioners has to this point, and they are in close contact with the individual that managed to get this passed in the city of Boulder. So after this meeting with these folks and kind of considering that we have now given our watershed unique rights of its own, I thought it would behoove this BOT to listen to a citizen-driven initiative to try to defend some of the wildlife up here via legislation. So I was hoping to find a second on this board for bringing this as a discussion item on one of our December BOT meetings. I'd be happy to send out the information this couple has provided, and also wanted to point out that while we don't have this as an ordinance required of all of our residents, we did include it as a requirement for STR owners. And so I think just to kind of keep on the train of equitable treatment to all folks, that we not single out STR owners as somehow unique from the need to exercise caution with your trash and recyclables and make sure that they are in bear-proof sheds, containers, trash cans, yada yada. So I was just hoping that somebody might second me in bringing this proposed ordinance forward as a discussion item in a December meeting.
I saw Tanya's hand go up. Was that a question or a second?
I second it, but I also want to say I didn't get those emails, so I don't know, but I will second it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of interest in hearing that, Jonathan, and you have at least 2, so let's get that as a discussion item on an agenda.
Alrighty, I'll be happy to send out all that info. And yeah, I saw it as kind of a no-brainer. It's something that everybody does. I think the discussion we'll have to have as the BOT will come down to enforcement and fines attached to any said ordinance. So looking forward to bringing that up in discussion in the next month. And that's about it.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. Does anyone else have other business? We're going to have a meeting where we don't have to extend to 10:30. Do I hear a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
second.
We have a second. Macy?
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baumhover,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin.
Yes.
All right.
And so at 9:47, this meeting is adjourned. Thank
Thanks,
you
everybody.
guys
That was a
all.
very constructive meeting.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Night, everybody.
Have a good evening.